One of the first things you got to look for is, does it move you? Simply that. Can you take your eyes away from it? I find I can dismiss a singer or a guitar player almost with my eyes before my ears. Because it's your natural inclination to walk into a club and say, well, you know, these guys are loud. It's fun. Or these guys are making a sound, you know. But if you find yourself going, I don't love that singer, or I don't love the sound of his voice, or I don't think that guitar player is doing anything that new. So you got to decide if you're passionate about it, if it moves you. Then I go through a bit of a checklist. I will say, you can go through and say things like, is that guitar player doing something new? Or is the chemistry between, let's say there's a 4-piece band and there's guitar, bass, drums, and a lead singer. And you go, is there chemistry there? Are they making a sound? Are they playing in a style that you haven't heard before? Remember, I'm the guy that likes to sign things that are really new and take the risk on a new sound, on a new thing. You go, is that something great? You know, like you go back and you go, you ever listen to Led Zeppelin 1? You go, holy cow. Even when you hear the stories about Led Zeppelin when they first got in the room together, they even knew it. They were like, my God, we're just playing old blues standards, but we're creaming them like nobody's ever creamed them before. This is amazing. So I look for the chemistry between the players. I look for a great voice. I look for something that is pushing a musical envelope to a new place. And then I look to see, both at the beginning and again at the end, if I feel passion, if it's moving me emotionally. The first thing I would say is look to yourself and see where your passion for music is, like to create music, is coming from. And have it define who you are. So you'll be, it's a weird sort of arc of starting with who your influences are and then transcending them. Because let's face it, in the Beatles, like you can look at the Beatles, you can say, well, you hear Little Richard, and you hear some Chuck Berry, and you hear some Everly Brothers, and you definitely hear Buddy Holly. You hear the Everly Brothers. You know, you hear these different influences. You can hear the harmonies. You can hear the whoo. You know, you can hear the idea of some of the chord changes of Buddy Holly. You know, you can hear these things. They want it to be sort of like, you know, it's a classic story told. They sort of had a skiffle influence from the north of England, and they had an R&B, black rock and roll influence from the south of America. Not South America, but south, you know, like, you know, Texas and blues and Mississippi. And they stuck that together. I mean, you know, I always kind of thought that if you took Fats Domino, Blueberry Hill, and you took Love Me Do, they weren't really too far off on the rock scale. They were kind of in the same place in terms of the way the phrasing was in the vocal. But what did the Beatles do after? They transcended. They took all those elements, homogenized them into themselves, and then transcended. And that was the Beatles' invasion. And then, my God, what did they do after that? Just a couple of years. Imagine, just a few years later, 4 years later, they were making Revolver and Sgt. Pepper. And they transcended that art, their initial inspiration, and transcended even farther into musical territory that had not been explored before. And what do we do as music fans? We put them at the top. We put the Beach Boys at the Brian Wilson did the same thing. You know, these are the that's what's interesting to me about when an artist comes in. You can almost tell, I can tell pretty quick, if an artist is a guy who, let's say, looks at the modern rock charts and says, oh, I can do that, you know, or they, you know, and maybe he is actually a pretty good guy. He might be a good mimic at that kind of stuff. But when the guy comes in, or girl, who comes in and says, they don't actually ever really say, I'm going to do something new and different. They just automatically are new and different because they have that fire in them. Those are the guys you sign. It's It's hard to spot. A lot of times the first feeling you might have when you're in the presence of somebody who's really great is that you won't really know it. You'll just feel slightly uncomfortable. because in a way they know something that you don't, and they're kind of testing you to see if you're somebody that can hang with them based on and can help their vision of things. It's very interesting stuff. I don't know if anybody's ever said this stuff before. Sort of in public. But I can tell you this. I would gather to say that these are the kinds of things that the real record men that we know of. These are the kinds of things that they talk about.